Fern,
We're back.
Let's get right to it. Let's get right into it.
We're back from Puerto Rico.
No, we're back.
The live recap show of our trip to Puerto Rico starts now.
No, you know what? No more digressing on these episodes. We're going to get right into it. Feet hip width apart, hands slightly outside the shoulders, weight in the heels, tighten the midline, straight bar path, active shoulders, keep the bar in the front of plane. Cody,
cut it.
Great episode.
This has been great, everybody. Points of performance. Faults, we should list those. Inactive shoulders, forward
pushing around the face,
muted hip. Yeah, all those things.
All right, cool.
Fern, we got some feedback that people wanted us to be direct, and that's what the show's like, if we're as direct as some people would like. So, no, in all seriousness, number one, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number two, if you do have feedback for us, please send it. We will happily consider it. That doesn't mean we will always implement it, but we will consider all of it.
Actually, let's be fair. You and I will consider none of it. Cody will consider all of it. He will pass it on to us, and then in turn, we will reconsider none of it.
Yeah.
It's the circle of life.
But here's the deal. It will get read.
It will get read. No.
It will get read.
We actually, Cody, come on for a second. And by the way, Tanya, Joby, look at me. Look at me. CrossFit Virless. Nutrition and fitness. If I were taller, you can read the whole shirt.
I'm pretty sure it's Viralis, but I could be wrong.
Hey, is it Virless or is it Viagra or Cialis?
Vitality.
Is it Vernaculator? What is it?
Blue Chew. Are we sponsored by Blue Chew yet? I have those cookies are great, Tanya. If you're watching this, thank you.
I just ate 4.
What's that?
You just ate 4?
Yeah. I know. I got them right before we went to Puerto Rico, and I was like,
it's quite literally the only food in my office at this point. I haven't eaten all day. So.
I just opened we just got home last night, Fern and I from Puerto Rico. I went into my pantry. I was like, oh, I forgot about the cookies. Yeah. Ackerman has it right. Virilis it is. Look at me, Joby. Nutrition and fitness saves lives. Cody.
Whatever. It's a stupid name.
Fern thought it was Viagra. Cody, we talk a lot about feedback on the show. What about our company? Is our company founded on feedback? Is it one of the values?
It's I think it's one of the values. I know there's like team to team, and I think that there's
definitely not one of the core values. However,
category of 0.
There is a lot of feedback that goes through, which for the record is like even within the team, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah,
feedback is.
But hey, I'll give you some feedback on feedback. Fern and I were in Puerto Rico. We did a level 2 together. Then we had a great. Hey, I would be remiss if we didn't give Naldi a shout out.
Shout out to my man Naldi fucking Robles. Like that guy is
Poppy. Come on,
Poppy. That guy. Listen, as far as like country managers go or regional managers go, top of the list.
Oh no,
top of the list.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Ackerman? Is he gone?
Yeah, you know what he was about to do? He was about to talk shit about me. That's what was about to happen. Yeah. He was like, yeah. What do you got to say there, little man? What do you got to say? Fix your internet. Fix your internet.
Is it me?
It's definitely not us. Yeah.
We got a huge snowstorm. I think I think my internet's doing poor because of it. But you were saying nice things about Naldi, right?
Is that how internet works? This is snow.
I don't know. Ross said it this morning, and I was like, that sounds right. Our internet's been choppy. We were coming home yesterday, and right now we don't have internet in the house still, so we're like leeching off of somebody. But he was like, the internet's down. He texted. I was like, oh shit. I got the coach's call yesterday. Anyway, Naldi's my poppy, and. Know what I sent him a message, but Naldi reminds me of like old school CrossFit. He just cares.
Dude.
Easy, Corey. It's true. Naldi's old school CrossFit. Like Fern, this dude is basically coming out of pocket, right? Crushing it in Puerto Rico, doing it for the right reasons. We've gone from like, what do you say, 12 affiliates in Puerto Rico to nearly 40.
He's doubled it in like 6 months. He's just crushing.
He's going to open his box soon. And, like I said, we're really excited. We got some big things going down there. and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, the point being, Fern gave a great lecture, world class affiliate. Isn't it cool that we have our own lecture series, Fern?
I mean, I don't know if it's cool or not, but we do it. It's great.
Yeah, we have a couple lectures. Fern finished the lecture. Cody came up to me and goes, "What feedback you got?" That's how we do it.
I like it.
I gave him feedback. I said, do that again, but better next time.
You immediately forget it all.
No, he was confused.
And I gave you feedback. Jay was working for me this week.
I worked for him all weekend. I got feedback this morning. So anyway, Corey, Virginia Beach internet is way better. All right, Cody.
Presses.
So let's just be clear. We were going to talk about the squats today. Our buddy Carl Eagleman, Whiteboard Daily, had a friend pass away. So
an emergency, yeah.
Yeah, he had an emergency. So we pushed squats. Is he coming on next week, Cody, or have we not heard back yet?
It's not confirmed yet.
Not confirmed, but we will get to squats. But Cody had spent a lot of time researching Carl's posts in relationship to the squats. So we said, let's not put that work to waste. We'll come back to it, and we'll go to the presses today. So pages 118 to 122. Is that accurate? Who's that, Mr. Hobart?
Yep. Young Jaime Hobart.
He looks so young there. Now he's got that floppy hair. Yeah. Hobart's another attorney that doesn't practice.
Correct. Which Naldi educated us, because Naldi is also an attorney, that the difference between an attorney and a lawyer is non-licensed or non-bar.
I don't know. To be fair,
Naldi might have made that up.
I think he was making that up, and I was at that point just exhausted from hanging out for 3 days with you, and I was just like, whatever you want to say now. Fern, tell everybody that I went out 4 nights in a row.
No, you didn't go out 4 nights in a row. You went to dinner with us 4 nights in a row.
That's a big step.
Still might be quota for the year.
Every night I wanted to go back to leave here on Friday. I left the house at 3 a.m. Then you go to Puerto Rico, and it's like 3-hour difference. Who knew that there was an extra hour in there? And
most people.
So we're out till like 11, and then we had to get up the next day. But I will say, I saw you saw that I posted that picture of that beef Wellington, Fern.
So good, dude.
That was one of the best dinners I've ever had. Kikita in Puerto Rico. Legit. All right. We're going to talk about the press, the push press, and the push jerk.
Everybody knows that the press is my favorite lecture in the level 1.
I feel like you're being sarcastic right now.
I am, in fact, being sarcastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's just I always make fun of this because number one, the presses, it is what it is. It's boring, right? It is necessary but boring. And then I used to have a real aversion to the push jerk. When I was first coaching, I was petrified to teach the push jerk. I was sick on those days.
So not everyone knows this. If you make it onto seminar staff, right? You earn your red shirt. The first lecture you give is the press lecture.
Correct.
So most of us we've done this the most amount of times because it was the first lecture we got. We continue to get it over the years. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about where do you want to start? Lead the conversation for us, Cody. Fern and I are I'm speaking on Fern's behalf. We're a little brain dead.
Which is
We're
never
a little
good.
Brain dead from Puerto Rico.
I'm fine. I've been on small group calls, hammering away all day. I'm good. Jay just woke up.
I just woke up. It's a 3-hour time difference. It's only 5:00 in Puerto Rico right now. Where do you want us to begin on this, Cody?
Right here in the very first paragraph, it's already talking about the power zone. So right here. So I think we just need to talk about what the power zone is. What does that mean?
Jay?
The thing about the power zone.
Jay wasn't even aware. Jay wasn't even aware that was a term until he threw that in there.
I don't know what to do.
I call it the intensity zone. That's the thing. So intensity and power are one and the same. So when we talk about the power zone, You explain it, Fern. This is your opportunity because you're working towards your level 4. So I want you to be able to, it's practice. Like, remember Gerardo Sr. at the level 2 this weekend?
Yeah, he was great.
He came up to me and goes, you know what? When you asked that girl to teach this, she learned it better. Because when you hear it, it's one thing. You practice it, it's another. When you teach it to someone, you retain it. So I'm giving you an opportunity right here to retain this information.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for presenting me with the opportunity to excel, not just get by, but thrive.
Here's the deal. Just give me the facts.
So 3 movements we're going to be talking about today: press, push, jerk, progression. Both. Typically what you would see, you would progress in loading as you work across all 3 movements, but then progressing in complexity across all 3 movements. And there will be more moving parts as you go from press to push, jerk. And we're talking about the power zone. Essentially what we're referring to is the core or the midline, where when we're talking about the core to extremity principle or idea, where that starts at the core of the body and then radiates out to the extremities. And we're talking about the power zone. He's talking about the core midline stabilization, or think trunk, hip to shoulder, where you brace to essentially do anything athletic. And that's what they're referring to in the context of that term and the level 1 trainer guide.
Well done. You nailed it.
Did I excel? Did I thrive?
It was good. Approve in advance.
Did you give me? Did I give you an approve in advance?
You did.
I meant to put hold.
It's too late. It already went through. Went to
nope,
the higher ups.
I'll send an email back.
So let's talk about this. In all 3 movements, we talk about this in a lecture. Feet are in the same spot. Hands are in the same spot. The beginning of the movement, the ending of all 3 movements look identical. What happens in the middle clearly changes. And I think let's start with the press. To me, it's one of the most under-taught movements in CrossFit.
Yeah, I always joke it's the sexiest movement in CrossFit, which means it's actually super boring. And the reason 2 reasons. It's kind of like the air squat, meaning people don't teach it because they're like, it's simple.
Just squat.
Just squat, just press overhead. Not to be confused with like there's a lot happening there. Also not to be confused with it could, by and large, in most people, be drastically improved if you just worked on it a little bit. So when we're talking about the press, again, if we think for those of you who are, going to take your level 2, if you're going to be prepping for your level 4, if you don't know this information cold, you are in for a rough time taking that evaluation. Okay. So when we're talking about setup, feet, hands, every single time. I was hammering this in the level 2 this weekend when we were in Puerto Rico. That should become standing procedure for the first thing that you check in every movement. Check their hands, check their feet every single time, every single rep. Like you will just be better off for putting that in your standing checklist.
If you're someone that struggles either cueing every rep or as you're developing, giving multiple cues per rep, that's where you start. And the cool thing is in this setup position, especially, whether it's the squat or the press, I mean, as we get to the deadlift, the setup is a little more taxing, but it's like they're just standing there. You have plenty of time and opportunity to walk through. I would say easily you can check 8 to 12 people per rep. As you get better, it's just a quick scan. You don't have to walk by, but yeah, feet and hands over and over again. That's what you should be doing.
On that note, I'm gonna ask something controversial here.
Ooh,
oh no, we love controversy.
Thumbs.
I will be voting for. Oh, is that our? What are we talking about?
Like the open thumb grip or wrap around.
Ooh,
great question.
I don't think it's that controversial.
It's not controversial. That is what I would consider something for somebody who is a little bit more competent. I don't want to say advanced, but they're more competent with the movements. So first and foremost, it's not safe. Okay. It's not necessarily unsafe, but you would definitely want a full grip on the bar. Now, I will also say for the record that I do a lot of overhead pressing with my thumb underneath the bar. Okay. There's a time and a place for it. I definitely don't think you should ever do a bench press like that. Just for the
Certainly not. I every time Roz is like, I'm about to go bench, I always yell at him like, don't put clips on the bar.
right.
Um,
Now I think more importantly, why do people do that is the question.
but I want to wait. I didn't get to answer.
Nobody cares.
Everyone, Corey, do you care? So I give two answers, and I think Rich Froning created this problem. By the way, did you listen to him on that Cam Hanes podcast?
No,
On the way home? I listened to it on the way home. It was really good. Check him out. That was if you haven't listened to Rich on the Cam Hanes show, it was very entertaining. Rich started this, especially with the thrusters. So two things I always tell people. One, it's referred to as the suicide grip for a reason. So are you prepared to deal with that? Two, they'll be like, well, Rich does. I'm like, cool. When you win the games 10 times, come back and do whatever the fuck you want with your grip. But until then, let's wrap your damn thumbs around the bar.
Like again, there's a time and a place for it, right? So
yeah, when you win the games 10 times.
In many instances, you will see people do that who are doing it to compensate for lack of optimal position in the front rack position. I don't want to say mobility because it may or may not be mobility, right? But it's somewhat more comfortable and easy for them to get into the front rack position with their thumb underneath. Now, it can and does present some other problems, particularly for something like a fast transition where if it's either a jerk or a thruster. Not for everybody, but it can, right? It's not an absolute statement. You should just look at that in the context of who is the person that is doing this. If this is somebody who has good capacity, has good experience, and you are dialed into their movement as well as they're dialed into their movement, I don't see a problem with it. Same thing if people are going thumbs over for the pull-ups, right? I don't think it's the same. It's not necessarily stronger like in the pull-up. There is argument that wrapping the thumb around does make for a stronger grip, right? Like we are basically apes and the thumb is there for a reason. So now why other people will do it is because they can shift the bar sometimes a little bit closer to the base of the palm, at which point, if we're talking about directional forces, I can punch the bar a little bit harder the closer I get it to directly in front of the forearm. Okay. Right. If the bar is here and I go to punch, my hand will kind of give in that position first. The closer I move it towards the base. Now, for the record, you can do that with a closed grip with your thumb around the bar as well. Right. So it's not that you just can't do that. It's typically a compensation. And for some people, it's just more comfortable. So it's not like, hey, don't ever do that again.
Have you ever purposely put somebody there?
Oh, I wouldn't say no. I've never purposely put somebody there. People will just kind of naturally like find themselves there sometimes.
But you've never coached someone to do that.
I don't want to say never. I probably have, to be honest with you. Just looking at somebody's position and who I'm talking to, I'm like, hey, try throwing your thumb underneath just to see if this helps you a little bit.
Cool.
I'd be willing to bet that I have. It's not often, maybe like a handful of times.
Yeah. Cody, keep going. You're doing great.
This is Jay's way of telling everybody he's just really tired and can't think right now.
Yes, it wasn't a controversial topic. We just talked about it for 6 minutes.
All right. Well, we did it. We talked about it. Good job. All right. So
moving down to one of my next questions here is something that, you just said the starting position for all of them is the same, right? The finish position is the same. In the starting position, though, we're talking about being
when we say finish position, to be clear, you think about the jerk, it ends with
overhead,
stand, right?
Yeah.
So it's overhead and you're standing at full hip extension.
Now, Fern, I think you just kind of like mentioned it a little bit there, but why is the front rack for the presses different than the front rack for a front squat?
Two reasons. The first and primary reason being we are pressing overhead. So we're at some point when the bar moves, off of the front rack position to the overhead position, I'm going to have to shift my elbows underneath to press overhead anyway. So if we're not squatting in order to keep our elbows away from our knees, it's, if I'm thinking like from a positional standpoint, I'll kind of move this. If I've got my elbows high in this position, when I go to press, I'm not just going to do a tricep extension to press the bar overhead. I'm going to have to drop the elbows to press in that direction anyway, in order to, again, I want my forearms in the direction of travel is really what I need to make happen. Right. And in this position, my forearms are not in the direction of travel. They are now in this position because that is the direction the bar is going to be moving.
Now, follow up to that, the thruster. I am squatting. I do need my elbows high. So how do I go from that high elbow position to transition into a press?
Well, you just drop your elbows.
So I need to drop my elbows on the way up from a front squat. So
if you think, I don't want to say this because I specifically told you not to do that, friend. At the level 1, we teach a hybrid grip in the thruster. And when we say hybrid grip, what we mean is you need a full grip on the bar. However, your elbows need to be up high enough that they're not going to smash into your thighs at the bottom, but that you, like you are suggesting, Cody, can then transition overhead. Keep in mind, there's also that brief moment of weightlessness in the thruster when you hit that hip extension where you can drop your elbows a little bit to finish that press. But we need both. And that, going back to what Fern was saying about the suicide grip there, that's partly probably why some people prefer not to wrap their thumbs, because they can get those elbows a little higher but still get it overhead.
There is argument that you need more mobility to have like a really good grip with no thumb around the bar, but neither here nor there. Now, the tricky part with the thruster is you want to have both positions, right? I want to have an optimal front rack position at the bottom so that I can be efficient, and I want to have an optimal front rack at the top so I can make sure that the transition happens really smoothly. And that's just understanding when and how the elbows would transition. So if I was coming down overhead, as soon as that bar kind of like hits the elbow, boom, my elbows will wrap around. And then as I stand up to come to that top position, almost simultaneously as I extend, the elbows will drop to take over in order to press into the overhead position. So it's just practice. That's kind of like the technique of that, which is like, how do you seamlessly transition? So it's not they stay in one position the whole time. It's just as I bring down, boom, they rotate around. And then as I stand up, boom, they rotate underneath. And for some people, that's just a lot to manage at the same time, or it just takes practice.
If you put your elbows up again, what I remind people of is the bar is going to move in the direction of your forearms for the most part. So if you go to jerk with those hands up real high, unless you're really proficient at it and know what to do with your face, it's going to go into your chin or throat. And if your elbow, a lot of times we see people pressing around their face in the press, and we just jump to, hey, move that bar straight, or, immediately they grab PVC to give them that tactile feedback. But in reality, until they change their elbow position, that bar may continue to go around the face because it's just that initial press is going to be forward.
I'm sure there's somebody out there who's just like, well, I saw so-and-so jerk with their elbows high. And I'm like, we're not saying it's not a thing. Again,
no, Olympic lifters are specialized, and that's what they do.
Right. But it's just like, just always be careful of using the ends of the spectrum of anything as like your general guidance for what you should be doing.
Most of the things, I think it was Sherwood that used to say, it's like most people, most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's most people that walk into your box are going to be, shoulder width on their squat stand, hip width on their overhead movements. Now, like I told the level 2 groups this weekend, watch a rep. If someone's super narrow and you're like, I'll watch a rep, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But if you're not hitting the points of performance, I'm going to adjust your feet. Same thing with the press. If that bar is doing something funky, I'm going to put you in the position I think you should be in.
Okay. Question.
You
Pop
got
quiz.
a question?
Pop quiz, hot shot.
For Cody or for me? I pass.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got to go.
You can't phone a friend.
My only other friend is on this call right now. So
I know you can't phone either one of us. We're here. For new coaches, low hanging fruit. All right. So they're like, all right, cool. I know where the hands go. I know where the feet go.
Yep.
It's just the press. What else should I be looking for?
Ooh. What else should, I feel like you're setting me up on this one, but I would be looking at quads, butts, guts.
Okay. Now, sure question. what's the likelihood that they wouldn't be standing at attention, like at full extension?
I don't mean it in a way where like I don't think they're standing up tall, but I think a lot of times they can be braced better. You know, I'm standing tall right
Okay.
now. Like
So
my 5'3", right?
So
But
the
I'm not.
power zone. You're referring to the power zone.
I'm bringing it back. See what I'm doing is a callback to the power zone. I'm showing you what I'm doing is showing you what you should have said earlier.
I'm painting this picture. I'm painting this picture that you're showing me. Yeah.
Bob
Power
Russell.
zone.
Yeah.
If we would have had Carl on, he calls it the BBQ, right? But I forget what his refers to. Can you find that, Cody?
Quad, butt,
Belly,
and
maybe?
Belly? Yeah.
Maybe belly, yeah. But I say quads, butts, guts.
butt, belly, and quads, BBQ.
Yeah, butt, belly,
Maybe.
quads.
I don't know.
Is that what the right answer was?
Well, I'm just low hanging fruit, right? So you could go there, or what would also be something they could look at, right? I find that like the people overlook midline because they.
Oh, that's exactly what I was saying.
Is it? You should say.
Yeah, what I'm saying, butt, belly, quads, as Corey's putting there, or quads, butts, guts. This is what I'm looking at. That you're nice and solid.
Right. No, I know what you're saying. What I'm saying is a lot of people will bypass that because they're like, oh, well, it's not, I mean, it's not crazy, but I'm like, but can they pull their ribs down? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, we should ask them. At which point the athlete shows us a totally different position. And I'm like, do you see the difference now? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, this is the whole point of coaching, which is just check it, verify it, ask for more. And now you have contrast in the athlete, right? So midline is one. And then obviously what else could we, bar path probably. I would say like that one's probably the hardest to see. I was gonna say active shoulders, right? If I was looking for like low hanging fruit, just like two things I could ask an athlete to do to get verification on something is like, hey, can you pull your ribs down? Boom, I will get an answer off of that reaction. And then B, can you press up on that bar a little bit harder? At which point I will get a reaction off of that, at which point I can gauge this. So again, from a new coach standpoint, if you're trying to get midline and active shoulders dialed in, just ask them if they can give you more in both of those positions in such that they would give you the contrast that you're looking for to determine what is a good position for them. And they'll typically give you both of those. And I'm like, okay, now I understand what your body position looks like when it's in the right body position. And I have that as a reference point. But if you just let people press in this overhead position and you're like, oh no, he's midline. I'm like, pull your ribs down. And then they do this. You're like, that's a different position now, right? Simply because I asked for it.
I think 2 points of performance that I think most people can do better, even when they think they're giving you their all, are knees out in the squat. I think almost always if you put your hands on the outside and ask them to push out harder, you see an improvement. And active shoulders in the press. Everyone's here. You say active shoulders, you always see a gain of an inch or two on that first try, and then they start hitting it.
Yep, just press up a little bit more.
What do you think about this? I often say on the quads, butts, guts, it should look very similar to the hollow position.
I don't know about that. In the hollow position, you would have a counter, or like you would actually press your lower lumbar into the floor. So I would disagree.
I think it's close.
Just for the record, it's actually nothing like that position, but I understand what you're saying.
I think if you're trying to get someone to understand pulling their ribs down, like telling them like they're in the hollow, it might be an overcorrection, but it will also lead them to doing it better.
I agree with your assertion that the action that they would do would be to tighten their belly and pull their ribs down, but the position would not look the same at all. One of them is curved, the other one is straight.
Right.
So
contrived. That was a hard word to translate this week.
It means fake. Yeah.
That leads me into my next question on here, which is can you give me some examples of how you would fix excessive layback? So somebody that's lost midline, right?
I would say
they're laying back away and trying to finish their press. What are some examples?
Hey, don't do that. That's not right.
Listen, this is what being a level 4 is about. Everybody is.
You see what you just did there?
This is
That's
great.
not good. You leaned back.
Yeah.
I'd say you leaned back.
Yeah.
Can we lean back less?
This is.
You want me to do what?
How do you do that? What's happening? Do you have those pulled up somewhere?
Yeah, he's prepped, dude. This is what he spends so many hours on. He's like, I've been working, boys, and he's pulling up clips from Marvel comics.
Sending in his hours. He's punching
yeah.
in.
The
Watching Black Wakanda.
so
Black
so
Panther?
for the you're an idiot.
It was on the plane. I didn't watch it.
So forget just this fault. Any cue, what is the body part that is out of place, and give it a direction, right? So if they are leaned back, we would say that their rib cage is poking out, right? If the rib cage is poking out, just go with the simple, be like, hey, pull your ribs in or down or whatever. The point is, it doesn't matter. It's opposite of what they have going on, right? So if you're looking for the answer, tell your wrestler, like, what body part is not where it's supposed to be, and then tell it essentially to do the opposite of what it's doing.
Yeah, and we go over this a lot in the coaches development aspect of Affiliate U. There's typically more than one body part out of place. So in that position, what else is out of place? Well, your shoulders are back, right? So we could ask for shoulders forward, right? Well, it could be many things.
That would be a weird one, but yes, you're right.
And it's also your body part's out of place in reference to something usually. So my ribs are out, right? What is it in reference to? Well, what would you be looking at? You'd be looking at where they are compared to where they should be stacked, right? So you're typically looking at a body part in reference to another body part. Let's go back and forth. Let's give cues. So you've said
I like how that one didn't pan out the way that you wanted, dude. Like, let's just move on. Let's just move on. Let's just move on, everybody. Go on to the next topic.
I'm gonna think of it. Like, no, but for example, when we say let's use another one. I can't think of it. Okay. So give a cue for
right.
your
hold on. Right.
Leaning back.
Here's
okay. Ribs down. Ribs down. Right. We'll start with verbal. Right. Ribs down. Right. If they were to give, if you were to give a tactile cue, Jay, what would you do?
I would just punch him square in the stomach.
Okay, that's also a good one. What if you were to give a visual? What if you were to give a visual? Give us a visual.
I would say, hey, Cody, you're doing this. I want you to do that. This is how something I do every level one, not every level one, most level ones. All right, guys, we're in the rack position. Cool. I get them in a nice rack position. Feet are hip width apart. Elbows are in the right spot. I say, all right, now I want you to all close your eyes. At random, I'm going to punch one of you in the stomach. And it's interesting because you watch every time they all do it. So I like to do it that way. I used to be like, close your eyes. I'm gonna punch you guys in the stomach. But now I go. I've learned. I've tweaked. It's like at random. So, like, oh shit, is it me? But they all get prepared.
This is where understanding, creating this would be great since you're the vernaculator. The like creating a common vernacular with you and your athletes, right? So like any cue is good as long as we both understand what it means. So in the CrossFit Kids course, they would teach. They're not going to use any of that stuff, right? And you're also typically not going to
punch the kids.
You're typically not supposed to put your hands on them at all, unless it is.
But I didn't actually put my hands on them. I said I'm going to.
Right, and now they're traumatized and need counseling.
But their ribs are down. But they're crying.
So they'll tell people, they'll say, hey, pat your belly and growl like a bear, right? To get them to just feel what the position looks like. At which point, I could use that reference to be like bear belly if I wanted to, as long as we all know what that means, right? Because a cue, again, it's not supposed to be technically correct. I guess say blueberry pancakes, and if we discuss what the action for that cue is supposed to be, and it happens, then great. But the important part about the visual cue just gave was the contrast, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to glaze over that. Was if you just say, hey, I want you to do this. We left out the most important piece, which was what were they doing? Because now they only have 50% of the information to make the adjustment. And I tell this if you don't give them the contrast, and you're like, yo, bring your elbows up. Your assumption is that you are already doing that. You're like, oh, no, I'm definitely already doing that. Even though you look like a gigantic bag of trash, like you always do when you move.
You gave the Foundations of Effective Coaching lecture this weekend at the level 2. And obviously demonstration is one of the 6 criteria. And you say it's, hey, it's not just can you move bad, but it's it's not just can you move well, but it's can you move well demonstrating bad movement.
Right.
That's important because visual
Sarah,
cues.
Sarah Wilkins, she's like, most people don't move well enough to move poorly well.
Yeah,
Right.
it's true though. Or you just until you coach, you're like always working to move better that you forget what it's like. Or I was demonstrating for Fernando and he's like, round your lower back. And it's like, I really have to think like round that, not my upper back. Like that just takes practice. But you should, those in the Affiliate U curriculum, you will demonstrate good movement, but you will also demonstrate bad movement because it's a third of the cues out there. And if we don't, we're bypassing them.
So real quick, go ahead.
What would your cue be, Cody?
I don't know. You guys,
this is too long already.
Got me. Yeah.
How did we get you? You're gonna have an answer. We're not moving on.
I'm gone. Right.
What's your cue?
No, I mean, mine would have been a tactile cue, right? Like I would have gone up and done like I'm going to punch you in the gut thing. That's the one that I like to go to because I know that it's going to make people tense up. I've never actually
challenge
going in. Challenge has been thrown in.
Challenge coming in. You have a class of 15 people. You have somebody that is 30 feet away from you, and you don't have the time to make it over there. And if you did have the time, it would be a complete waste of energy, right? Like, and I was working actually with Gabby this weekend at the level 2, and actually Yali Camille.
Oh, the little girl.
Yeah. Because both of them were very quiet, and I was like, "Hey, I need you to give that cue, but I need you to do it from over here. Like your cue's correct, but you're the whispering coach right now. So I thought
Gabby was quiet
at times. Yeah. She wasn't quiet after I fixed her.
You did, because I think I did have her after you. And I told her she was mean. I was like, you need to be quiet. You need to quiet down.
I prefer they be mean. But giving that cue from across the room, Cody, like if Jay's doing that and you don't have the ability to get a tactile cue in very quickly.
Give me a cue, Cody. Give me a cue.
Oh, Jesus. Put your arms down.
That's a bad cue. Jesus can't help him.
Put your arms down and exit the stream. That's your cue.
Come on, fix me.
Well, I would if I'm looking across the room, I would say squeeze your butt, right? That's number one. I want to get their lower half locked in. And then for me, probably something like suck your belly button in.
Okay. I would tell you that's too many, right? So like if we were really to be like, if you were to, I would shorten that. I'd be like, hey, squeeze your butt, ribs down.
Right.
Like just give both. Yeah. Give both at the same time. But again, this is actually a great demonstration of what we're talking about in the foundations of effective training, which is it doesn't take long for us to present a very real scenario in which you can create a problem for somebody if they're lacking skills, whether it's a high volume of cues or they like one cue versus the other. It's like, cool, stand over here and do that. And all of a sudden people are like, I'm like, how do I do this? And I'm like, start with their name and then tell them what is out of place and where to put it. Right? I'd be like, Jason, pull that bar back. Cody, elbows up, stuff like that. Right. So again, all of this goes into knowing the movements, but then allowing you to really maximize your ability to coach, but do it from anywhere in the room.
That's what you have to learn all three styles of cueing. And I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but I've certainly said it before. They're like love languages. You tend to give what you like to receive. And you have people in class that like to receive other styles of cues, whether they just learn better, react better, or they don't like receiving certain styles of cues. You have people that don't like tactile cues, or people that don't like verbal cues. So you really have to develop across all three.
And then understanding really how to utilize all of them very well allows you to do them simultaneously. Right? Like I was, who was it? I don't know if it was Yoel. Somebody in the groups. I was like, somebody was in the, I think it was the sumo deadlift tie pull or teaching sumo tie pull, and they were talking about like they weren't standing up all the way or something like that. And I was like, you could use a tactile cue. And they're like, well, what about like how do I look at other people? I'm like, well, you're gonna feel their hand,
their body.
Or you're gonna feel their body. You're gonna feel their back when they hit this. And I'm like, and you can be looking over here while this is happening. And somebody was like, that's a pro move. And I was like, I'm a pro.
Don't try this at home. Yeah, and that's part of it, right? Or and that's like when we teach that cross circle cueing, I always force my people. I'm like, the person you're standing next to, tactile, that person over there, verbal. And then it just forces you not only to give multiple cues per rep, but to challenge you to give multiple styles of cues per rep.
It also creates intention. It creates intention for every rep, which is like a really overlooked aspect of coaching, which is like, you should never be calling a rep without knowing what it is that you're looking for prior to. Otherwise, you're just randomly looking around the room, at which point you will see nothing. Okay.
Before we go on to the push press, Cody, is it commercial time?
We got one.
We got a
Hey
commercial
guys, Fran
today.
here. Real quick, I just want to share a quick success story from one of the hundreds of gyms that we've been able to help inside of Affiliate U. And our mission and best hour of their day is to ultimately improve and grow the greater CrossFit community by building better boxes and creating better businesses with better coaching staff so we can bring CrossFit to the masses. Check it out. And if you think we can help you, don't hesitate to reach out.
Some of the specific results I have had with being part of Affiliate University, I've had an increase in membership retention. I was able to go through a rate increase. With that rate increase, it also helped me start to clean up my membership profiles. It really got me prepared for the money call, which helped me map kind of my next 6 months of what I need to do in terms of my membership. I just completed our first Bring a Friend week, and we had 22 people who came in our gym for the first time who had never come in before. We also had members who had gone away return. Building on that momentum, I feel like I've also been able to start layering in the coach development program for my coaches and helping them have the opportunity to learn how to effectively run group classes, teach progressions, and understand lesson plans better. I feel more excited, more energized about my business than I ever have. I've had shifts and changes, but I feel like I've also been able to manage that well. That, I think, is inspiring and exciting for me as an affiliate owner.
Nikki Sharp, you are a commercial.
Believe. She's our number one Ted Lasso fan.
Yes, I think season 3 is coming out soon.
It is coming out, I think, in March.
Oh, excited. You ready, Cody, for number 4? Oh, wait, can you bring up this question?
Yeah, I got it.
When doing the cross circle cueing, once you provide a cue and stay for the next rep to see hopeful change, how do you continue to move throughout the circle without having the group do a ton of reps?
Ooh, this is a good one because there's actually some unknown issues with this question.
Let's hear it.
So based on that question, because this happens quite a bit, and it most often we will see coach call a rep. So squat, stand, whatever it is, go, reset, whatever, depending on the movement. And then when the rep is done, they will give the correction.
Mm-hmm.
What I would recommend there is they should be correcting in the position that is wrong, right? So at the bottom of the squat, if I was giving a cross circle cue, I would be like knees out while they're at the bottom of the squat to have them correct. I will see that fix. Now I don't need the additional rep. I'm like, do that next time. And I can check back as I work my way around the group. So
pulling that into the presses, right? That's like, hey, all right, we got 8 people, Fern, get your elbows up. Cody, squeeze your butt. So-and-so do this, press. And I'm like this. And then they're like, cool, stand. Hey, Jay, next rep, I want you to pull your ribs down. Versus Jay, ribs down.
Yep. So
now I can still give some static cues in the finish position.
Right. So I always encourage people, I'm like, keep them in the position and make the corrections while they're there, because correction after the fact, you miss the opportunity for them to move their body into the correct position to go from bad to good.
Can't find it. You're going to have to do that at some point.
Now, Chelsea, that is a great question. So, but I did want to highlight both of those, right? Because it is a 2-part problem. I want to try to correct them there because it just creates, if you stack enough efficiencies, all of a sudden things get really fast from a coaching standpoint. And that would be one of them. Don't wait till after the rep. So I need 2, correct it in that single rep. And then I can follow on when I'm doing something else later, or follow up when I'm doing something later. But I saw them make the change and I can give that feedback right there on the spot. Like, yeah, Jay, that's way better. Keep doing that. Cody, you're still terrible, but keep trying, right? Like whatever that feedback is going to be. Okay. Now, if you are going to do that, but to answer her question, yes, you would need to follow up. right? Meaning I would need to get the next rep. So let's just say I was working with the athlete next to me and directly across. If I gave that cross circle cue, and then I was working with the athlete next to me, when I moved to the next athlete or closest to me, I would check back again with that athlete that I was cross circle cueing to do the follow up. That's part of the check back. If we're looking at like the WICAR acronym, the watch, ID, cue, check back, acknowledge, and then repeat, right? Like that's what we would want to do. So you would do the check back even if you move.
Yeah, and I think, in that same question, it's how do you continue to move throughout the circle without having the group do a ton of reps? You want them to do a ton of reps.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
not a bad thing.
a ton is relative, right? So like there's typically a
Ratio.
progression. More like a progression, but there probably is an optimal ratio. Who knows what it is? That's probably more predicated on the coach. Like what's the good enough ratio? Well, the good enough ratio is the number of reps that it allows the coach to get them to good position, right? So what I would say is typically like a progression. They go from not calling a ton of reps because they're not actually correcting, and then you start forcing the correction, at which point they need more reps because they don't see very well, and then that rep count starts to come down as they learn how to be proficient by moving around the group and where and when to see to get maximum number of corrections. Meaning like when somebody starts stacking 4 or 5 cues in static positions, automatically we know that they're not going to need as many reps as somebody who's not doing that to get people into better positions. So, but that's what I would tell you, Chelsea. Like you want to get as many reps as gets them to a point where you're like, I'm happy with this. Now, the trick there is doing it at a pace that doesn't annoy people to death. Right. So don't hold them in static positions too long. Don't try to fix everybody in one rep. Like what is your cadence as you're moving around throughout the room?
I think one of the best things you can do to not bore people to death is just give cues. If you're giving feedback on every rep, it at a minimum keeps them engaged, knowing, hey, she's watching. How do you find this balance? And I think we got this question at the seminar. Okay, so you're giving a cue and it's not working. How long do you stay on that one person without, before moving on?
So I think the strategy is it's not how long, but how fast can you shift through cues? Meaning if you give one and it doesn't work, typically be like, hey, if you give the same cue 2-3 times and nothing happens, then change it. Well, as you get more proficient, you give it once. And if it doesn't work, then you shift the type of cue immediately in order to get the change that you want. And if you're really going to challenge yourself, I would challenge you, give the cue once. If it doesn't work, shift. If that one doesn't work, give a third one, right? So verbal didn't work, visual didn't work, boom, shift to tactile, get it fixed, and then move on. And you can do that really quickly, but you need to intentionally be ready to work through that process very quickly in order to make it seem seamless and not have like the kind of weird, awkward break in the flow of the group. And this would probably be something we should probably film this at some point, Jay, to like walk through these different scenarios. Like how would somebody do that like very quickly? Because I think some people probably have a hard time in like visualizing what that looks like. But you could do all 3 in well under 10 seconds and it wouldn't feel rushed. You know what I mean?
Good news. We've got a whole new line of videos coming out in the near future where we will be giving out coaching feedback, coaching advice, and people can sign up for it. Is that right, Cody?
So, yeah. So with that, I think to answer that question more directly, I think people both underestimate the number of cues that you could get or the number of reps that you can call as long as you're moving at an appropriate pace. Right. There's definitely too many where people are just like, all right, dude, enough is enough. Right. But it's far more than you think. I would argue you could take a group through 35 to 40 reps if you're moving at an appropriate tempo before people get really annoyed and check out.
Yeah. All right. Cody, can I go on to number 4?
Bring it.
7. Go to 7.
Can you come up onto your toes during a push press, or is that a sign of a fault occurring? This is very common question, and something we see every weekend. So you want to answer, Vern? Or do
I was
you
going to
want
let
me
you answer. I was just otherwise it's like we're not really entirely sure what value you bring to the show if I get all the answers.
Here's the thing. Can you come onto your toes? Absolutely. I might even say you should. However, it has to be a byproduct of hip extension. When it goes wrong, it's you are on your toes too prematurely. This was a huge thing in my groups, Fern, in Puerto Rico. They were all just like, they were not only coming onto their toes, but they were teaching it. And if you teach come onto your toes, I'm almost certain it's going to happen prematurely. But if you don't teach it, but you just teach a powerful, explosive hip extension, the byproduct will most likely be rising onto your toes. Then, before you chime in, the other thing to consider is, what's the task at hand?
Right.
Right? If it's a 75-pound push press, I probably don't want to come onto my toes. That probably means I'm overemphasizing my hip extension relative to what's necessary.
Yeah, that one is like a nuanced one, right? So it's just like it is quarter extremity that needs to remain intact. Going to the toes before going to hip extension is a violation of that principle, right? I'm prioritizing the smaller joint. But then, like, what's the load? How much are they coming up off of the floor? When are they coming off of the floor? Because remember, it's a push press, right? Which means when I get to extension of the hip, there's no rebend there, which means if I'm on my toes, I got to press myself back down to the floor anyway. So just based on those two things, at some point, if my body's moving down and the bar's moving up, the bar would move zero in that scenario, right? Like it would cancel each other out. So is it going to happen? Potentially. I mean, if you're really getting aggressive with it, but it shouldn't be much. And you should really focus for the push press specifically on keeping the heels down and driving through and doing all of that work with the hips primarily. Is it the end of the world if you don't? But it's like, it's going to be subtle, or it should be, in order to minimize the amount of time that the heels are up off of the floor. Because I mean, if you went to like full kind of plantar flexion and you were talking about 3 to 4 inches off of the floor, that's 3 to 4 inches have to go back down to the floor in order to get the bar to move in the right direction. Jay's still trying to figure out what plantar flexion is.
What the heck is that?
It's a type of tree, right?
Yeah. Dude, good American Pie reference.
So
I haven't thought about her in a long time, but I want to thank you for that.
And I was seeing a lot in the med ball clean too, and that's a perfect example. It's like at most a med ball clean is typically 20 pounds for men, 14 for women. It's like, do I need to come on? Like, part of the reason we come onto our toe. What?
Michael,
this is our biggest donation ever. $10 for Cody. You might. Hey, Mike, are you?
That $10 is going. That $10 is going to Cody's haircut fund. We need to get that sorted out.
Are you hiring Mike? Because he makes more money from you than he does from us. So
this is Cody. This is Cody has dummy accounts. He's just giving himself money.
He's like, look, he's trying to set himself up for when he asks to raise him. Like, look, I can go to Mike.
Getting all these donations.
They're paying Mike too much. That's a good point, Aaron. Hey, but he did a good job on yesterday's coaches development. That entire crew in San Diego, Mike, Destiny, Aaron, you had one other coach in there that I'm blanking on. Oh, Rusty. You guys all did great yesterday. You see it a lot in the med ball clean. Don't forget, one of the reasons we come onto our toes in the Olympic lifts is also to travel our feet. Right? We go from our pulling position to our squat stance in a clean or a snatch, etc.
Change in position.
Right. But in a med ball clean, I would argue depending on, it's rare that hip extension is required for a rep to count. So do you need to fully open your hip? Maybe not. Should you practice it? Yes. But you certainly don't need to come onto your toes. Your feet are already in your squat stance. Yeah. And I always see this, I don't know about you, Fern, but when I see someone rising under their toes intentionally, when I coach them, hey, stay in your heels longer, their hip extension almost always looks more powerful.
Well, because all of the effort gets transferred to the hip versus being dispersed across 3 joints. When that kind of like the lower joint isn't necessary.
I know what 3 joints you're talking about, but for the listeners.
Elbow, the shoulder, and the pinky finger, right?
That was the pinky finger.
So yeah, I think, that's always the case typically. right? But those are nuanced questions, and I'm glad people are asking them. And those just require a little bit deeper understanding of the mechanics of the movement, which I think is great, right? Like, because at some point you're like, are you going to say anything about that? And I'm like, nope. Like, everything was in sequence. They got their heels down. It's a heavy ass barbell, right? Like, go for it. You know, does it negatively impact mechanical advantage, right? If you go to your toes and suddenly we're moving out of the frontal plane,
Smoke
three
two
joints, right?
joints. The blind.
Right. It negatively impact mechanical advantage, meaning they're moving away from frontal plane. Now we have a totally different problem. If they're going to their toes and now the body's shifting forward, that's going to be a problem.
Cool. By the way, Nikki Sharp, March 15th, month from today.
No, I saw that.
Ted Lasso.
Happy birthday, Chappie Man, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's your son's birthday today.
Correct.
Is he watching?
No.
What did you get him for his birthday?
Our kids are not allowed to watch YouTube. I don't know, but I'm sure his mom got him some good presents.
That's the right answer. I don't know, but Jess got him something good.
He's in a phase now where his counter to everything is, but I want it.
Oh,
Can I have cupcakes for breakfast? No, but I want it. I was like, I understand. I get it. However, you can't have it.
I never, when I was a kid, my stepfather, life's not fair. Like, I never understood that till you had a kid and you're like, hey, life's not fair.
Tough shit. Yeah. I also want cupcakes for breakfast, but I'm not trying to be a sloppy person.
Not even for his birthday, he can have a cupcake?
Not for breakfast.
Man, you guys are mean over there. The farmhouse is mean.
I had cupcakes last night. I brought everybody Valentine's Day cards and cupcakes yesterday. Everybody.
I landed in from Puerto Rico and immediately picked up 2 bouquets of flowers, one for Roz, one for Madison.
I got no thanks. I gave him my card to Chappie and he went and hugged Jess. He's like, thanks.
Yes, good call, Trish.
Correct.
That's my number one fan right there, Trish. So in the press lecture, we talk about as you move from the press to the push press to the push jerk, you should be able to add 30% in load. So, you know, somebody that's pressing 100 pounds, the push press should look like 130. The push jerk should look like 170. Mm-hmm. Cody wants to know, A, is that realistic? And then B, if so, why don't we practice squat jerks regularly to reach that potential?
So when you say, Nikki Sharp coming in, I'll take 1 cent, Bob. 1 cent. She wanted to come in 1 cent lower than Mike C.
Make sure you watch the preview for the new season as Diamond Dogs. What's that?
Got me.
Tell us more, Nikki Sharp.
No, Nikki, I need to know what Diamond Dogs is.
Nikki Sharp.
Diamond Dogs is part of, dude. It's part of. Do you not know what Diamond Dogs?
Oh,
is?
Diamond Dogs is those when they're together.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. I forgot what we were talking about. The squat. Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be probably a significant part of the show, the Diamond Dogs. But what's his name is gone though. He left the crew. Anyway, doesn't matter. Jay's gone again. His Wi-Fi sucks. But the squat jerks.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask is because in the guide, and I'm gonna bring it onto the screen here.
In the summary, yeah,
it says that at which point the catch becomes very low and an increasing amount of the lift is accomplished by the overhead squat. So even in the guide, like it says, like you should be able to do the push jerk continually, lower and lower and lower and lower until basically you're doing an overhead squat.
The limiting factor there will be overhead position, meaning like for the squat jerk specifically, you would need to either have the front rack capacity to start with your hands wide. So Kane Wilkes, if you've ever seen Kane Wilkes lift, he's an Olympian. He was out of Chesapeake down the road here. He's a heavyweight. And he's like I forget what his weight class is, but he's a heavy, and he will jerk from an extremely wide front rack position because when he gets to the overhead, it basically almost looks like he's got an overhead squat position. If you could do that, you could potentially squat jerk from the front rack position. CJ Cummings will do something kind of similar from the front rack position. Most people don't have that ability. And then most people also don't have, ooh, that's a blast from the past. And then most people don't have the ability to overhead squat from a press grip. This guy's such a savage.
Yeah, I think what you're basically saying, Fern, is because most people can't do it.
Right, but you see how his hands are so wide, and that basically.
Well, they traveled out into his overhead squat stance.
Again, advanced, but they started pretty wide. Because he adjusted after the clean. But can you go back real quick, Cody? He's not keeping, just for the record.
There's his front rack, and they are
very
wide.
That's pretty wide. I mean, that's at least 2 fists wider than his shoulders, which is very hard for people to do. So again, that is dependent on a couple of other things. And why am I blanking on his name?
Kendrick Ferris?
Kendrick Ferris, yeah. Now, if you could go, you'll see some kind of Chinese lifters who will be able to do that from a kind of a normal front rack position with like super narrow grip, relatively speaking.
And that's a perfect example of like somebody coming in and being like, well, this guy keeps his hands super wide. It's like he's jerking 400 pounds, right? Like,
right.
And also keep in mind, something going back to that suicide grip.
That's a good question. Pull that up, Cody.
And then, but before you go to there, it's like they're specialized. Like, keep in mind, a lot of what we're doing in CrossFit is meant to be transferable. So cool. You want to go super wide. What happens when we do a thruster? What happens when we do this? Like, these movements should lend themselves to one another.
The internal shoulder rotation. So yes, we could probably agree that there is internal shoulder rotation there. You will see any number of really, really strong, very powerful, very competent Olympic lifters that will have some degree of internal rotation. This one, you will not see internal rotation, I do not believe. Yeah, no, that is literally the opposite of internal rotation.
That is
crazy. So that's just a little bit wide, not super wide. But that internal rotation, so this goes back to a concept that we talk about with regard to in the common movement themes in the level 2 course, right? And what we button that up with is just like effective stance and grip. And effective stance and grip allows the athlete to accomplish a task relative to their capacity, right? So if somebody is, I don't know, call it overhead squatting 400 pounds and they have internal rotation at the shoulder, we probably know some things about their shoulder girdle, right? Is it optimal? No. But if they've been training in that internal rotation to get to the point to overhead squat 400 pounds, I'm not super concerned with some degree of internal rotation. Again, this is the same example I brought up earlier, which is like be very, very cautious of using the margins, the edges of the margins to create like what is good and what is bad.
Edges of the margins? Is that
So on that point then, right? Like, what do you think is a realistic number percentage wise for the 30% rule? Like, I feel like most people can go.
I think that's pretty.
It's just a reference point, right? It's not exact math. It's just intended to communicate because of the additional dynamics of the hip and the push press going from flexion to extension, and then from the push jerk going from flexion to extension back into flexion. You would be capable of moving more weight. The first one being like I get to use my hips altogether. The second one being I get to retreat to a lower position so I don't have to move the bars far. So it's just to demonstrate because of that, I should be moving more load. Relatively speaking, as a reference point, you'd be looking at roughly 30%. It's not exact. But if they were moving the same weight, you'd be like, okay, well, I should be moving about 30% more than that. Like, so what is the problem now? Is there a sequence issue? Do they have a positional issue? Like what is happening there? So I don't know. I think 30% is fine. It's just a reference point. Just like saying that you should be able to front squat 130% of what you clean, right? Is that exact? No, but it's a good reference point if you want to be able to like really get after it. But it will expose a deficiency somewhere. Is like if you have gross departure from that percentage, then it should lend itself to some questions, is what I would say.
That's a good way to look at it. If you are not even close to it, something's probably going wrong.
Right.
Cool. All right. Bringing it back.
We got a
So
couple more.
Push press. Do we want to go to? Are we just talking about?
no, we'll go to the. Well, we're kind of bleeding into the push press. Are we only covering the press today, Cody?
It's all of them. It's press, push, jerk.
Oh, we got some. Okay. Well,
I mean, we've been touching on all of it. Like we've talked.
This
about
podcast is going to go late.
we're gonna need some more donations if we're gonna go on the push press.
Nikki, I'm going to need that extra cent so that we can keep the show going.
Well, let's answer these questions and then dig in a little more. And as we're doing this, if you're watching, if you do have specific questions on the push press or push jerk, drop them in there. What do you both think is the most commonly missed fault in teaching any of these three movements?
So out of the three, like which one do you think is the most commonly missed fault from press to push jerk?
I would go with, I'm going to cheat a little bit, but I think it's probably either forward inclination or muted hip, meaning some deviation of the torso angle in the push press. And I say it just because it's relatively easy to see, but people let their members get away with it.
I don't know that I have an answer to that question. I don't know. I would go with a static fault. Probably. I would be like, well, that's a tough one, Trish, because the hip drive really only wouldn't happen in one of the three movements, right? You start extended in the press. If you didn't go to hip extension in the push press, it'd be super weird. Which means
we'll talk about that because this happens in both the sumo deadlift, and for the record, the push press and the sumo deadlift high pull, the push jerk, and the med ball clean have a ton of overlap. But a lot of times in the push press, people are seeing someone press early and they say it's a lack of hip extension. It's not. Like you said, it would be pretty weird to not open your hips.
Super weird. Yeah.
Like you would have to literally finish.
You would do a jerk essentially, or just
and
or
not
something
stand
super,
up
or super
and then
strange.
not stand. Right.
Yeah.
Same with the sumo deadlift high pull. If I pull early, I'm still going to open my hips.
Right. And that's kind of just, again, understanding the sequence of the movement. And again, where you should be focusing your time. They're like, what's the major point of performance? They're like hip extension. I'm like, what's going to happen? Right. It's inevitable. So I don't know that it's the major, right? But if we're talking about push press, timing or some sort of torso deviation, right? Like either an early push, or forward inclination or muted hip is really probably the two of those. If it's the jerk, probably hip extension is that one. But I don't know. They're all unique to each other. They all have their own problems. So if I was to be like, for the press, midline stabilization, for the push press, forward inclination of the chest, for the push jerk, hip extension. Those are the primary ones that I'm willing to bet on that I will find those in a class.
Yeah, and you've also somewhat pointed out the most important ones. Right?
Right.
Most important is weird, but if we're triaging, that's kind of what we're looking for first.
Well, if you're looking at just the way they're listed, neutral spine. When we move over to push press, it's vertical torso, and when we move over to push jerk, the first one is hip extension.
Yeah. Why is the strict press not included in the push press progression, and neither included in the push jerk progression? Don't they all layer on one another?
This is a. I used to talk about this. I don't anymore, but there's multiple uses of the term progression.
Yeah, I was going to say it's semantics, really.
Yeah, it's really just semantics. So when we talk about the progression is a way to teach a movement, meaning like dip and hold, dip drive slow, dip drive fast, dip drive press, versus these movements will progress in difficulty, meaning least complex to more complex, press, push jerk. And then the other is in the context of like the GHD, where there's a progression, but that's a go, no go criteria based on the ability to perform a certain volume of movements, right? So you could technically use it three different ways. Now, I think what they're asking for is like, hey, why wouldn't you teach the press before you teach the push press? And ultimately, here's why. In the context of a lesson plan, you probably don't have that much time. Also, they all contain all of the same points of performance. right? Everything that's in the push press is included, or excuse me, in the press is included in the push press, which is also included in the push jerk.
We're just
at different-
adding on
just different
specific-
times, right? Just different times. So you shouldn't. Here's what I would argue: you shouldn't need to.
Well, that's
because
no different
they're
than
all
saying,
included.
do we coach the air squat every time we coach the front squat and then the overhead? Like, a lot of that should be baked into it. If we're, in the push press progression, we have, let's talk about it, right? We have a dip, we have a dip and drive slowly, we have a dip and drive at speed, and then we have the full movement. Within that, we've got the setup. So we should be touching on midline stabilization again. We've got the bar path that we're dealing with that vertical torso and the dip drive. We've got, active shoulders, like Fern said, super easy. It's in the finish position. So we're still doing all of those. We just don't need to do it every time. But let me ask you this, Fern.
I understand that. I want to pull that. I'm going to start that.
Oh,
I was trying to just.
before you go to
I know.
that,
I was just trying to decipher the question, but now I understand it.
We'll get to Trisha's question. But when we're at the level 2, and someone's like, "Hey, in my teach packs, I'm teaching the push press," and then they start teaching the press, how do you address that?
I'll just stop them and have them just teach the push press. I won't have them teach the press. I'm like, it's not necessary. Just go into teaching the push press.
Yeah, and then and then on top of that, we
And
would also.
Sorry, I was just like, and it's because they're like, well, I need to teach that in order to teach this, and I'm like, there is some assumption about that I probably would have done that at some point prior to this, but in the context of this, I just want to see you teach the push press. Also, you can still cover all of the points of performance of the press in the push press. You would just do it when they finish the full movement, right? When they're at the top, boom, that is the end of the press. I should have seen everything that I needed to see in the context of that. So it's just not necessary. And, but there's some missing context there, which is like, well, no, you're not randomly going to teach somebody a push press first before you teach them anything else.
Yeah, we would assume if this is their first exposure to CrossFit, to going overhead.
However, I don't think that's that weird, right? If you brought somebody and you were doing a foundations or some sort of onboarding, and I think it would be very appropriate to teach somebody a lightweight push press without teaching them the press. I can still teach the mechanics of that.
We have plenty of affiliate U clients that don't do an on-ramp like that. You might walk in on day 1, we're doing a push jerk. Cool. Right? I mean, that's the point. They're functional movements. Most likely, even if they've never done them purposefully, they've done something that looks like a push jerk in their everyday life.
So many people are freaking out by that right now. They're like, what? Why would you ever do that?
How could you? You want to pull up Patricia's question for
Well, I got one more too, because I heard you guys say it a couple times already. Active shoulders. I think a lot of people get that wrong because when we're hanging from a pull-up bar, we're always thinking about pulling things down, but active shoulders is different for different types of movements, right? So what does an active shoulder look like in regards to pressing?
In which plane?
Well, I'm overhead. Right?
That's that's a pro question. Like, see how he did that? We all knew what you were doing, and then he had to, in what plane? Like, he's like, I'm letting you know how smart.
He asked a very specific question. He was like, what does it look like when pressing? Because he's actually, I'm clarifying his question because I know what he's asking, right. But I want to be able to answer the question correctly, because if it was in the sagittal plane, well, then it looks different. In the overhead position, it looks like pressing against the load. So anytime we're talking about active shoulders, we're talking about resisting the load. If I'm hanging, my body is the load. So my body's pushing or pulling down. I want to pull my body up into the active shoulder. If I'm pressing overhead, the load's pushing down. I want to press up. If I'm pressing, either doing bench press or a push up, the weight is pushing. My weight is pushing this way, which I want to press that direction. So it depends on the movement, but it should. And the other thing that's confusing about that is, like, the goal, really, practically speaking, when you teach it, it's going to look a little bit contrived in a lot of positions. However, the goal is actually to keep the shoulder in a neutral position.
Yeah, it's going to look contrived because typically it's unloaded or it's PVC.
Right. But how do you teach it? You'd have to over exaggerate it, right, to get somebody to understand what pressing feels like.
Pop quiz, Cody.
Uh-oh,
how do we define active shoulders? What does active shoulders mean? I've said it before.
Well, I would use like what Fern just said. It's where you're pressing against the load.
That was it. Well, this goes to show how little Jay's paying attention, because I literally just said that.
Yeah, but Cody was paying less attention. No, but I was looking for not allowing your shoulders to yield to the load.
Right. So yeah, I just said the same thing, but in a more positive format.
Ooh,
I said I
sick
accept it.
burn, Cody. Sick burn.
It's 2-on-1. It's 2-on-1, and I agree with you, Corey. I think we're gonna do a next episode, tomorrow's episode of the progression. If we get $100 in donations, Cody will shave his mustache live.
Jesus, what?
On the show. On the show. If we make $100, Cody shaves his mustache.
Somebody's about
live.
to drop $100 right now into that
Mike
chat.
Caputo's like, all right, let me go check my bank account. What would Shayna say about that? What's that?
Just for the record, tomorrow's episode is going to be kind of cool because we get JR, who filmed coaching at a random affiliate.
Yeah,
That's
JR
dope.
is in, I want to say Ohio. I'm pretty sure OV CrossFit in Ohio, and he vacations every year to Punta Gorda in Florida, and he recorded there purposely because he's preparing for his level 4. And we've talked about like you're going to have 8 to 10 to 12 strangers, and you got to be prepared for it.
Oh, I thought he actually made a donation.
You don't want to see this face without a beard, Mike. You don't want to see that. So yeah, I'm really excited about that, and that just goes to show how serious people are. Oh, there he is. It just goes to show how serious people are taking this. And JR said, I'm really excited about it. So
okay.
we lost track. We're talking about shaving. There we go.
So Trish is referring to the old school clean and press, which was very different. You forgot to move that decimal place over, Trish. It should be two spots to the right. But thank you. Well, we genuinely appreciate it. We're getting close.
That's fair. She wanted to make sure she's comfortable donating. And it worked.
I get it. Right. Just dipping her toes in.
It's interesting because it's different colors depending on how much they donate. You notice that?
I know. So the clean and press is old school, meaning like it was essentially most of them would do like a power clean of some sort, and then the press was just a standing strict press, at which point you got some really wild positions, was turned into like standing bench press type positions. I don't know this for a fact, but I do believe they removed that because it was kind of becoming
that's exactly why.
Because it was a safety issue. Like
also hard to judge.
Right. I think, dude, did Rogue do a documentary on this? Nice Trish.
Did they?
Let him know. Not necessarily on the clean and press specifically, but like talking about the evolution of that movement.
Cody,
I could be wrong.
Can you Google that, Cody?
Anyway, but it largely was because I believe it was it puts people in a pretty injurious position and not necessary, so they changed it to mitigate that. Now I'm very happy to be proven wrong, but I do believe that to be accurate.
I know back in the day when it was the clean and press, a lot of it had to do with judging. You couldn't tell, so they just went with the jerk. When I used to work with Ripito, people would say strict press, and he would yell at them. He'd be like, "It's a press. We don't need to call it a strict press." Cool. Do we have any other questions on this, or do we? So let's briefly run through push press. We talked about the progression, execution of the movement, dip, then drive, then press. We've got the timing of it built in. Faults we're looking for, or points of performance, I should say. We want to see a vertical torso. That often goes wrong with forward inclination or muted hip. And then we want to see timing of the movement and speed of the movement.
Can you scroll down real quick to see the vertical, the forward inclination video? I believe there's a couple.
I'll find it while he's doing that. Nick Pierce, I saw. Yeah. Fern, I'm going to drop a question on here for Cody. Is that all right? Nick had asked this way at the beginning. Looking forward to this one, especially with regards to forward inclination and dip and muted hip. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what you look for when you're looking for those faults, the torso angle and a muted hip. Right
there. So that's a forward inclination of the torso. So this is actually leave this here, right? Because this is a good visual, right? So I believe that's Julie in that picture, but it doesn't matter. So imagine imagine that we replaced that PVC pipe that she's holding with something in the distant background behind the athlete. So imagine there's a pull-up rig behind the athlete. If you want the cheat code for this to see if they're moving in or out of the frontal plane, you would just move yourself to line them up against whatever that straight line is behind them and line it up on their, if you could scroll over, like just put your cursor on the one where he's vertical, Cody. Yeah. Just line that, whatever that straight line is, up against the shoulders and the hips. And then as they move through space, if the shoulder typically is the easier one to see, separates from whatever that straight line is behind them, you have forward inclination of the hip. And that becomes, and by using that, it creates a binary thing for you, meaning like it's either on that straight line or it's not. Like, and it doesn't even matter why or why not. I just know that it's not, at which point now I can problem solve. And I think I don't know how about you, Jay, but I think one of the more underutilized or the more under-recognized problems in forward inclination is the depth of the dip.
Oh yeah. It's kind of like the elbow position we were talking about earlier. There's a point where if I go too low in this dip, it doesn't matter how hard I'm working. It's like my butt's going to go back. It's right. Initiating your front squat or thruster, if you will.
Right. It's actually not weird if the lower you go into the squat, if to have forward inclination. It's actually what should happen.
Yeah. Unless you are just crazy mobile or flexible, but
even that scenario, there's going to be some, right? Because if your hips would have to travel like at least back some to get into the bottom of the squat, right? So, but even if you're super upright, you'll see some.
That's why this drill is so good, because if someone starts to go too low, now their butt's going to be pushing. It's going to start pretty vertical, and then their butt's going to be pushing back on that PVC.
Okay. Seems like, pull this up real quick, Cody. Seems like athletes with very poor shoulder mobility most often have the forward inclination of the hip because they don't know what the full lockout position should feel like. Maybe, right? So there's two different problems going on there. To assume that one would lead to the other, Trish, maybe. I would. It could happen both ways, but to think that forward inclination is going to lead to the bar being forward in that overhead position might just be an awareness piece, because if they're leaning forward, they're likely to press forward and then either have to overcorrect to bring the bar back into the frontal plane. Sometimes the forward inclination could be sorted out by either adjusting the depth of the dip or adjusting the stance, at which point you could have a scenario in which it would be optimal for somebody to make a slight adjustment to the stance where their heels would be no longer underneath their hips. They would be just outside the hips in order to create a slightly wider base where they could push their knees out and get into some dip position that would allow them to stay upright in that position. Not for everybody, but making adjustments, maybe turning their toes out could help as well, depending on what athlete we're talking about. So they could flare, they kind of like flare their knees out and give their pelvis somewhere to go as they work through the dip portion of the dip drive.
So let's quickly cover the jerk. We've got a dip, we've got a drive, we've got a press under, and then we've got a stand. Like we said, the jerk finishes in the same spot as the press, because now we're pressing ourselves under. You got to go down lower. Cody, you're on the push press still.
Yeah, they were just covering active shoulders there. This is jerk. Yeah, so go ahead.
The number one fault, like you kind of said for an earlier, is we're looking for hip extension here. And I think, we use a progression. We do a jump and land. We do a jump and land with our hands at our shoulders. We do a jump and punch. Here's Julie Fouché going through it. Then we do a full push jerk. Two things I would cover on this. One, especially when you're coaching athletes that have done the push jerk before, oftentimes they short the hip extension because they're thinking about, jerking a significant load. Well, the truth is, when you jerk a significant load, you're jumping as hard as you can, but you've got that weight pushing back down on you. So when you're coaching the jerk, what I want you to think about is jumping high, jumping hard. Don't worry about how high you're jumping. 95, 135, 225, that will limit how high you jump. The second thing that I see a lot. Well, before we go to that, what do you think about that, Fern?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Just, but similar to the topic about the what was the clean topic that we brought up with Andrew last week? There's something about, it was a topic that was just like, no, this is not optimal technique, but it depends on the capacity of the athlete and and what they're doing. So anywhere where I'm going with this is there. Yes. Right. We would optimal for the, I don't want to phrase this, right? If I'm trying to get to full, optimal. But if you're looking for absolute full hip extension, like there is good argument in the context of a CrossFit workout and a specific athlete where they don't need absolute full hip extension in order to move efficiently. It's would actually slow them down in some scenarios, right? Like now, everybody just heard that, but just to basically assume that I was talking about them. I'm not talking about any of you, probably, right? But you do have to, again, context, right? Are they moving fast, and is going to full hip extension necessary for them to get the bar to the appropriate height and receive in that bottom position to stand back up in order to cycle this fast? At which point I'm just like, could it be optimal if they extended? I mean, I don't know that it would be optimal, right? Because now you're covering more distance that isn't necessary. But is it good technique? Sure. But then that goes into another question about like, what's technique? Is just like the movements or positions used to accomplish a task. And if I don't need full hip extension there, again, this is all in the context of competition, not necessarily training or optimal movement, right? So there's a difference, right, to be delineated there.
I remember when we were judging, I forget what it was called, but it was basically Elizabeth at the games last year where they did the parallettes.
Right.
And I was watching Fikowski, and
I don't know if he dip.
Yeah, but on Elizabeth on the cleans, he clearly wasn't opening his hips, and probably many weren't. So I haven't watched the tape of it, but I'm sure if you go on there, they're not. And if you think about why, well, it was 135.95. That's like 30% of their clean. They don't need to. If that's 80-90%, need to be thinking about that. Also thinking about what the other movements that you're doing in that workout are. But
so that's just a conversation about like just teaching people to do it well and then allowing them to make the appropriate movements based on who they are. Meaning, like, for instance, like Jay, if you were working through a workout like that and you were clearly, moving a 95 to 115 bar really well, but not extending your hips, and then we get deeper into the workout and I see that your overhead position is starting to struggle, now the hip extension becomes more imperative because you're not moving the bar as high, right? And it's not that those ones before weren't good; they were fine, right? It's a point of performance. It doesn't mean end range, right? It doesn't constitute the end of the movement. I don't know if we're getting off track here, but I think this is the stuff to recognize as a coach, which is like, hey, yeah, we want them to extend the hip, but is it necessary now in the context of this training session? I don't know. Do I want them to move well? For sure. Can they do that? Have they demonstrated that to me many, many, many times? For sure. When they get tired, then I'm going to swoop in there and be like, get that hip extended, right? Like jump that bar overhead, because they're probably receiving now with the arms bent now because they're tired, right? Instead of here in this position.
And tying it back to the level one, we talk about it's a balance of safety, efficacy, and efficiency.
Right.
And if you're so concerned with the hip extension because you think that's the most safe position, well, the efficacy and the efficiency are going to
start to fall off a little bit.
Yeah. And it's not one or the other. It's a balance across all three.
And this is a different discussion than, is that the technical requirement for the movement? No. Right. And this is going back to like, why should we know all this shit? This is why, because you have to be able to apply context in these scenarios.
Well, the other thing I was going to bring up earlier, we watched it yesterday. Our coaches group did a phenomenal job going through the progressions. Mike, who's on here, well, he did the sumo deadlift pull, but quite a few people did a push jerk. And one of the things that they did well is, we go through the progression, jump and land, hands up, jump and punch. Then we go to the push jerk. And Chuck Carswell did this years ago and I stole it. It's like, when we go from that jump and punch, I try to move as quickly as possible. Here's your PVC, keep going. Because once you hand them that PVC, they're like, what's happening? And
the dummy stick.
Literally, it's literally the same thing we just did, but you have a pound. So I think that's one of the few times in a progression where it's like, don't even show it again. They just saw it. Here we go. Push jerk. So yeah, that's like one of the craziest. That's a classic.com workout. And if you've ever done it, your shoulders are smoked at the end.
What, the 5-5-5, or is it?
It's this. It's
5-3-1.
No, it's 5 sets of
that
1.
one. Yeah. 5 sets of 1, 5 to 3. Yeah.
Oh
5
man,
sets of 5.
and it's a perfect example of like you will dial in your technique when you get to those jerks because you need to, because your hips are smoked from the push press.
It's also to watch the natural progression of the push jerk because of how natural it becomes. Like you don't have to teach anybody. Like they will just naturally do it because it makes the most sense to the human body.
Remember vividly coaching one of my old personal training clients, Lady Di, I used to call her. It was actually her birthday yesterday. I texted her, and this was even before I had my box open. I used to train her in the Nautilus room of the Court Club, and I was like, "All right, I'm going to teach you the push jerk," and I couldn't get her to do it, and I just kept loading the push press up, and then she did a push jerk. And I was like, I'm the greatest coach alive, right? And I was like, I didn't do anything except make her have to do it right because we just.
And then she was smashed underneath all of the weight.
Yeah, she was crushing it. She's still crushing it. All right, did we cover everything, Cody?
Yeah. Anything else?
Well, I think we got it. So
tomorrow, bring your razor. I think Trish is going to go from $199 to $109.99. Let's talk about what we got this week. We've got
a couple of things. Yeah. One, happy belated Valentine's Day to everybody. Two, the progression tomorrow with Jay. Right. If
JR's on there.
JR's on there. And then Friday.
Tell us about it. Do you know who you got?
Affiliate hot seat. Yep. We have our first guest.
Can you share?
I know it's booked. I don't remember off the top of my head because we've been traveling since we booked it, but I know it's up there. I saw it come up. I'll take a look at it tomorrow.
Cool. So tell us a little more about what's going to happen on that show.
Yeah, affiliate hot seat. So we are opening this up to folks, affiliate owners, non-affiliate you folks, because you guys get tons of time with us, to come on and do some real-time coaching, right? Like if you got questions, you got stuff that you're struggling with, in any capacity inside of the affiliate, bring it on here. We'll help you out and help you come up with some solutions to help you to move the needle inside the affiliate. But Jay does the progression. I do the hot seat. Progression is for coaches. Hot seat is for affiliate owners. But it's just a way to chime in. And if you guys have questions about certain topics, bring those to the show. 9 a.m. Eastern every Friday, starting this Friday, February 17th.
I'm excited. Cody, will you be on that with him?
Yeah, I'll be on it. The guest is it's really interesting. His name is Richard Hoare, and he is a purely garage affiliate that's looking to move into like a real building.
Awesome.
So he's got some interesting challenges and whatnot.
Can't wait.
Turns out Fern knows his shit when it comes to owning an affiliate, and I was like, you should not be
Trish, I don't think if you need any tips on tax evasion, you're just doing it right now.
Yeah,
we don't need any more. Yeah.
Step one, don't pay your taxes. Fern knows what he's talking about. I'm excited to see because it's going to be little small things that make a difference. And, if you're an affiliate owner and you've never had coaching period, this is going to be a great opportunity for you. So if you're interested in being on the progression or on the, as a coach or on the hot seat, email Cody at besthouroftheirday.com. Cody spelled like it is right here in his handle, but Kodi. And super excited about it. We have a show this coming Monday, correct, Cody?
Jesus. Yeah. This coming up Monday is Nicole Torres, the resilient athlete.
Cool. She's going to talk all about how to link up with a physical therapist in your area. So I'm really excited about that. Awesome. Well, shout it again. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nikki Sharp. And thank you, Trish, for supporting the show. I would say we couldn't do it without you, but we could. We would still be doing it without those donations. But they do, they are appreciated. We are grateful to have you guys. We're grateful to see you guys that tune in every week because we do this because we love it. And secondly, because you guys love it. So thank you so much for that. Take us out, Cody.
And be aggressive. Learn how to push.